Okay, in the latest episode of Star Trek Picard, we see some familiar faces. We'll talk about that in a moment. Hello out there, I'm the oldest nerd, and on this particular episode of Picard, which is episode 7, we have made our way away from the Borg cube and to more pastoral surroundings. As Picard and Soji arrive on Nepenthe, which some people were saying in the forums that is that like Rurapente, and it's not. It actually comes from a Greek word that means cure or peace of mind or things such as that. It was used in Homer's Odyssey. So this is something that goes from Greek literature. So there are a number of planet names and things like that that come from more classical types of origins in this particular series. We find that finally, after many episodes, we're finally able to get a good look at Riker and Troy and their situation. In the previews, it looked very much like they were on Earth, but they are actually on Nepenthe, and they moved there because of the regenerative aspects of the planet. It has very fertile soil, and the soil regenerates itself. They originally went there because they had a son, Thad, who was born in space while they were still in Starfleet, and he developed some kind of neurovirus, mendaxic neuro something or other gobbledygook, and the only way that he could be cured is by the use of a positronic matrix. And by that time, anything with regards to synthetics was not allowed in the Federation. And so, and kind of a last-ditch effort, they decided to leave Starfleet and remain in the reserves and go to Nepenthe in order to hope that their son would survive beyond his 18th birthday, which he didn't. We're also introduced to Kestra, who is their daughter, who appears to be about 12 or so, who is suffering the loss of her brother, but a very imaginative and energetic youngster. When they're first encountered, she is in costume, and we find out later what she was doing was she was sent out to gather some herbs and other things to be put into a pizza. By the way, online there's a recipe for the pizza. It has a couple of elements, though, that are not real, so that would be a little bit difficult to do bunny corn sausage, for instance. And if you did, you'd still need to have the skill to know how to get rid of the poisonous parts of it. At any rate, it was a good-looking pizza, and we see that they still have pizza ovens and certain things, and they've shown this throughout the series, that there are some fairly normal-looking things. The clothes don't look terribly futuristic. There are still books. There are still things that you would find around a house that have survived the last 100 years. Why not the next 100 or so? And I think that's where they're coming from with a great deal of this. A couple of things were kind of disturbing here. We see a mind rape where in a flashback, Commodore O is getting to our Agnes Girardi while she's having lunch on the green in Okinawa. And they go back there to show what actually went on. We've suspected already that she was compelled in some way to do the bidding of the Jat Bosch, on which we're certain that Commodore O has some tie-in with. And what we find is that she does a forcible mind meld in order to put into Agnes's mind just how terrible things are if she doesn't take action and cooperate with them, and is made to ingest a tracking chip along with obviously some kind of buried instructions to kill Maddox once they encounter him. And so this has some effect on her. She's been with this crew and doesn't actually agree with that. And so she is trying her best to resist all of this and to try to convince the crew not to go where they can be followed. Noticing her distress, Raffi takes her back to a replicator and feeds her cake as a way of kind of forgetting her troubles. And after throwing up, and a funny bit in there is when Rios comes in and says, "Is that blood?" And she says, "No, it's red velvet." We find that Agnes injects herself in a private moment with something that causes her to have some kind of neurological problem, and that activates the emergency medical hologram, which apparently saves her life. And after that, apparently the Romulans are not able to track them. So whatever she did was something that might counteract the tracking device that was in her. So the idea that she was a spy before is kind of contradicted here in that she was certainly an unwilling, or rather a deceived spy. Going back to Nepenthe, we have Riker actually, when they encounter Riker, he is actually preparing this pizza we talked about a moment ago. And if you recall, in the Next Generation, one of his hobbies was cooking, whereas in the 24th century, you have replicators. Anything that you need, you just ask for it, and it comes out. I mean, even in this case, the cake was even sliced and had a fork with it. But there are some that, for hobby purposes, go ahead and make their own food. And Riker was one of those people in a TNG episode, I'm thinking fairly early in the second season. He has some people to his quarters, and he has acquired some kind of exotic egg, and he makes omelets with it in front of everybody as kind of a show. And evidently he's continuing on with this. We like the character of Kestra. She is brilliant and knows how to speak several imaginary languages, which they revealed that her brother had developed about 12 of them, including a butterfly language, which has to do with communicating by the way you flap your wings. Troy and Riker show themselves as good parents, and what happens whenever you have a sick child. You'd do anything for it. You'd sacrifice career, you'd sacrifice everything that you know, and try to do something to put them in an environment to where they can thrive, and have put all of their interest into Kestra, who seems to have grown up very well adjusted and funny and capable of things. And it's kind of a contrast to Picard himself, who never had children, who never knew anything but being in Starfleet, and tried to deal with Soji in a commanding kind of way, which didn't work on her because he wasn't her captain, and he didn't know how to be a parental figure. And some light touch by Riker and Troy kind of steer him in the direction that the most challenging thing he's ever done is being with a teenager, not anything that he's ever faced in Starfleet. And I thought that was kind of a nice little touch there. The only thing that bothers me in this particular episode is how they are not surprised of how Picard gets there. The technology that the Borg has for this instant transference across the galaxy, they didn't even ask. Whereas Riker was chiding Picard for not telling him what he was up to, he was also completely uncurious as to how he got there and then needing a ship. How does someone get to a place like where they are without a ship? And transporter technology is not something where you can beam from one world to the other. So they just kind of took that as a given, that he was there and needed a way off, and eventually his ship came and got him, but that was never questioned. And I find that interesting, seeing that Riker was already curious as to the reason that he was there and the problem that he was facing. And I thought it was a very good scene where Riker guesses everything to the least detail of what happened to Picard and why he's there. One other little detail I thought was kind of interesting, and I didn't get this out of the episode, but I did read this somewhere and I'll share it with you, is that the producers are fans of Lord of the Rings, and Elnor, Picard's protector, is Elvish for Star Trek. I'd like to know what you think about this episode, and let me know in the forums. I will be away for several days, so I will not be able to directly answer the forums after like a day or so. So please bear with me, if you will, until I can get back and read everything and answer everything. And by that time, we'll have another episode of Picard, as we said before, a couple of days late. So we'll be off grid for a little while my wife and I are celebrating our anniversary. So thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and don't go far.